Now, forming part of the agreement, the resale condominium schedule. So clause 1, unit information, the corporation number, the level number, and the unit number will be entered here. Parking, is it deeded, assigned, unassigned, none, or other? Storage, is it deeded, assigned, none, or other? And of course, clause 1.4 refers to the condo fees, the common expenses. Clause 1.5, the seller represents and warrants to the buyer that at the time for acceptance of this offer, the seller has not received a notice. So what we're looking for here is any special assessments, right? Has there been a notice? Has there been a decision to replace the windows or the balconies or the roof or anything that would impact your financial situation or decision on purchasing this unit? Now, clause 2, documentation, we are going to ask the seller to provide the declarations, the bylaws, the common element, rules, and regulation of the condominium corporation. Some of these can be 100 pages long and others maybe 5 pages. Now, the reserve fund study, I believe the number is about 13 units within the condo corporation. Anything more than that, they're supposed to produce a reserve fund study, and I believe it's every 5 years or so. The reason being that they're very expensive to do and complete, and they look at long-term costs for maintaining the building, and the common elements. So if it's smaller units, they don't necessarily have them. Larger units, you bet they do. Now, 2.1c, the most recent financial statements. So we want to make sure we have a good look at the finances. And of course, the last 12 months of board of directors and members' minutes, including most recent AGMs on or before. So we're going to ask for all these documents. We're going to give them, if they haven't already provided them on Paragon, we're going to request them maybe, 1 or 2 business days so that they can reach out to their condo corporation and provide them. There are some condo corporations that don't share that information until there's a deal in play. So that's why we don't always necessarily have them. Now, clause 2.2, the buyer shall provide the seller or the seller's agent on or before, this is where we input the time now, so 4 or 5 p.m. on the day your conditions are due. And of course, Form 408, which is new, thank you, NSREC, it was introduced in January of 22, and this is written confirmation which clauses or which buyer conditions have been satisfied. There was obviously a lot of confusion in the past, and so they just decided to clarify that with written instruction when your conditions are due, if you've met all of your buyer conditions, and if this is in fact the right purchase for you. Conveyance, clause 3, the buyer agrees that the conveyance of the property shall be subject to the provisions of the Condominium Act of Nova Scotia, the declaration and bylaws, including the common element rules and regulations of the Condominium Corporation, and agrees to accept title to the property subject to all rights and easements registered against title. Okay, there we go. Damage, the unit and the equipment herein shall be and remain at the risk of the seller, who shall be responsible to keep the property insured until closing. The day after, it is now your insurance will kick in. In the event that damage to the unit, the buyers, having advised of the insurance policy details, may agree to complete the purchase with the proceeds of the seller's unit. So let's say, something happens, maybe a tree smashes in and damages one of the units. Maybe it's not your unit, maybe it's another one. Well, you still want to close on that transaction that day, and then we'll figure out the insurance kind of going forward, okay? But we don't want to not close, because then we can be in breach of contract, and that can cost you money. Adjustments, representations. The buyer and the seller agree that any special assessments outstanding or levied by the Condominium Corporation on or before closing shall be paid by the seller. B, credit balance in the reserve or contingency fund of the property is included in the purchase price. And C, the monthly common expense fees are to be adjusted to the closing date. So if condo fees are due on the 1st of the month and you take possession on the 15th, then there will be an adjustment which will be done by your lawyers. So that will affect your closing day costs. So we just want to make sure we're having those conversations with our lawyer as well, because we don't want any surprises on closing day. That's it. That's all. If you have any questions, I can be reached at 902-999-2667.